Hello, this is Zahir Alam. Welcome you all in Frankly Speaking. My guest today is Lynn Goodia. Lynn Goodia is the Chief Executive Officer and Fellow of Australian Human Resources Institute, AHRI. She was appointed to the role in December 2012. Lynn has also held the role of Secretary General and Treasurer of the Asia Pacific Federation of Human Resources since 2012. Lynn was formerly National Manager, Professional Development at AHRI, a position she held from 2005 to 2012, and previously, Lynn held leadership and management roles within the education sector at Southwest Institute of TAFE and Deakin, Australia, in addition to the accounting roles within the mining and engineering industries located in the United States and Australia. We welcome Lynn Goodia on Frankly Speaking. Lynn, pleased to meet you and to have you on my show, Frankly Speaking, today. You were in Dhaka for the first time to attend an international conference on HR.
Yeah.
So let me begin with the modern definition of HR around the world, especially in Australia. How you look at and define the modern HR?
Well, I think it's changed very much over the years. I think when it first emerged, it was a personnel function, a very transactional function, much about disciplining the workforce and perhaps reducing the cost of people, where today it's a far more strategic contribution to partner with CEOs and leaders in actually structuring the workforce in a way that drives strategic outcomes and business performance.
But when you talk about the strategic
Yes.
outcome or the approach to define the modern HR, seriously the global community is putting emphasis on the transformation of HR in global practices?
Very much so. I think famous advisors to senior leaders such as Ram Charan suggest that organisations don't create value, people do.
Okay.
So if people create value in our organisations, then we need to work out a way to maximise the potential of that talent, their contribution, their competency and their commitment to the organisation. Yet I think we've seen in recent times evidence of very dysfunctional cultures in workplaces, and I think we only have to look back to the GFC and more recently to disasters such as the VW scenario. And I think both stockholders and society and the community in general are saying we've had enough. We do not want dysfunctional, toxic cultures inside our workplaces anymore. So I think there's an enormous opportunity for HR to partner with those business leaders to look at what actually is required to construct a workforce that's both agile in a very global and somewhat litigious business environment, but a very disruptive business environment as well. What was working yesterday isn't necessarily going to work tomorrow.
To have a very strong, precious human resources, what are the most critical factors?
In terms of the characteristics of the human resource professional or the actual workforce itself?
Actual workforce.
Okay, well I think you need, I'll start with diversity because I think that's a critical part and that's a challenge. If you think about diversity, that means you have to break through biases, both conscious biases as well as unconscious bias, starting from the way we recruit and who we're looking for. If often we know that when people interview, they make up their mind in 5 seconds, in the first 5 seconds,
yeah.
And they often are attracted to people who are like them in thinking and perhaps even physical appearance. So we have to look at how, in terms of a workforce, we can overcome some of those conscious and unconscious biases to stimulate and generate the kind of diverse workforce that we need. I think that the other major challenge in terms of a good workforce nowadays is that we need to be receptive to change. The fact that we need to change as an organisation and therefore our workforce needs to change, but our workers are also now demanding change. People aren't coming on to the workforce now and looking to stay forever. They are looking to do new things, different things. And so the challenge for the HR professional is how do we bring that talent into the organisation and maximise the return on that talent in the time that we have it. And I think that's sort of the exciting part of our workforce. It is going to always look different.
In some developing countries like Bangladesh,
Yes.
that retaining people is not a very desirable option.
Yes.
Why they think so? What is your assessment on that?
Well, I think that is part of that. I think there's a number of things. When you look at talent in a workplace, it's made up of 3 different things. There's a an outstanding professor, Professor Dave Ulrich, who talks about something called the talent equation. And he says that when you're looking at the talent of your organisation, it's made up of people's competence multiplied by their contribution, so what they do, multiplied by their commitment. And you can imagine that you can have a very competent person who comes to work every day and does their job, but is not committed to the organisation, so is not contributing to the culture. And if you're multiplying all those things together, if one of those is low, then your talent is low. I think the other aspect of that is that...
So everything is equally important, contribution and commitment and confidence?
Right. Because if you are incompetent, we can often deal with that. And if you look at talent in that way, if someone's incompetent, we can find HR solutions. We can develop their skills and capabilities. If someone is no longer challenged in their job, then we can restructure their job. We can stretch them, because a disengaged or an unstretched person is not very productive. Probably the hardest one to change if someone is not committed to the organisation, if they're not aligned to the culture. That's the hardest one to change, and that's where we've seen the organisational or the corporate failures around the country. Where
what should be an organisational approach in terms of, I mean, when they take into account competence, contribution, and commitment?
Yes.
If he or she lacks competence, and definitely she or he will contribute least, but she or he has good degree of commitment. What will happen then?
Okay, well, I think if you've got a good degree of commitment, that's a very good start, because what you've got, someone who's engaged, someone who wants to improve, wants to give, and wants to be part of it. I think often, and this is an opportunity for HR, is that much of the structure of our workforce starts with the way we construct work. So if we can restructure work, whether it be because someone is not being stretched or someone is out of their depth, the worst thing you can do to a very capable worker is put them into a job where they're suddenly out of their depth without giving them skills and support and training. And so they can go from being a very talented contributing worker to someone who suddenly is lost. So I think it is that balancing. But I will add to that actually is not just the organisation's responsibility. While we as HR professionals and as an organisation need to keep that balance and keep that perspective, individually as workers, as employees, we too have to own our talent equation. So I am responsible for my competence and seeking new skills and learning. I am responsible for what I do every day and looking for new challenges.
But don't you require any support system, any mechanism, any tools to develop myself?
That's the wonderful thing about HR. It's very much an umbrella of so many aspects of the profession, from learning and development to information systems and the like. And I think if you're talking about an exciting piece for the future, it's big data. The fact that we can learn so much more about our workers and understand our workforce in a way that allows us to craft a workforce that matches the organisational needs.
Dear viewers, welcome back. You're watching Frankly Speaking. My guest today is Lynn Goodia. She's the Chief Executive Officer and Fellow of Australian Human Resource Institute. Lynn, we're talking about the, let's shed some light on the transformation of HR. In developing countries like Bangladesh, some of the human resource professionals or practitioners arguing to develop a human resource ministry or creating a human resource ministry, because we're a country of 160 million people. We have many developmental challenges, and we're looking at to become a middle-income country. So creating a ministry to focus on the development of human resources, how critically important is that for a developing nation like Bangladesh?
Yeah, I do. I think it's significantly important. In Australia, we are opting for a path of self-regulation, but I think we have a perhaps slightly more mature HR function. But in a country like Bangladesh, where you are trying to leverage the opportunity of your country, particularly in terms of its talent and its people, and you have many of them, then in fact a more coordinated effort is really critical. But I think, like so many things, government can only do so much, and then much of the sustainability of any of those initiatives comes down to groups like BSHRM and the like, because I think it does come down to education and training and building not only the skills and knowledge but the behaviours of those people, because Right now we have a profession around the world, largely, where you don't need a prerequisite to put your shingle up as an HR practitioner. There is no impediment to be able to enter the profession, and I think that needs to change, because we are learning that not everyone can do HR, and most particularly not everyone can do HR well, that there are a very defined set of skills and capabilities, but behaviours that business leaders are looking for. And in fact, we did some really interesting research, and we have a model of competency similar to what BSHRM has. And the CEOs and leaders were very interested in the capabilities, but in every instance they valued more highly the behaviours of HR practitioners. That is what differentiates the talent. And that probably means in some cases there are people who need to take the HR hat off as we start to more professionalise the area of HR.
Lynn, things are changing in many spheres of life, and definitely there has been also an evolution in HR practices. You have been working in HR management and HR development for many years. So, I mean, in your view, what are the HR challenges facing in the coming years? I mean, significant or remarkable challenges ahead for HR development.
Well, I think earning the trust of those that they need to partner with. I think that the fact that we have a challenge. We are trying to build skills and capabilities of the profession, but equally we are trying to show and educate leaders as to what good HR looks like. And if they can see that, that is something they want. That is something they want to partner with. And I think we're probably looking at a scenario where maybe several decades ago the CFOs were not necessarily seen as a partner to the CEO. And there was, again, not really a regulatory impediment to people undertaking that role. That's changed now. Now we have an expectation of skills and capabilities that we expect CFOs to have, and I think that is the phase that we are entering into now. And I think you've got a very strong and committed profession here in Bangladesh that do want to build those skills and knowledge. Because it's what we don't know about the future is what it's going to look like. And therefore we don't know what our work and our workplaces are going to look like. So that's going to require great adaptability and agility in the skills and expertise of HR to be able to recraft and constantly recraft the workforce to match the changing economic and political scenarios.
Okay. Again, let's talk about the countries like Bangladesh.
Yes.
Here, we are now greatly putting forward emphasis on HRD.
Yes.
But in your view, in your assessment, we need to have a lot of leaders creating young leadership to take responsibility in many spheres of life. So how HR management and skills can efficiently develop requisite level of leadership in a country?
Okay, so I think, as you've said, having a government initiative that firstly recognises that it is a specific sets of skills and capabilities that articulate an HR professional, and then having organisations such as BSHRM and its partners being able to support that development. I think one of the very positive things about what I've observed here in Bangladesh is the enormous hunger and thirst to learn and connect with others. So through BSHRM, they are connected regionally through the Asia Pacific Federation, and then out into the World Federation with their president, Musharraf Hussain, is currently on the board of the World Federation. I think you cannot learn in isolation. I think the world is moving too fast. There are too many lessons that have already been learned that you can tap into, and it's those networks and those connections which I think are very impressive in the way in which...
So building partnership is important.
Very much so, very much.
Lynn Goodyear, in your view, what are the informal ways to that help organizations or a country to motivate and develop its workforce or leaders?
Okay, I think we talked about how disruptive the workplace now is, and of course technology is one of those big disruptors. And I don't know about you, but I have kids who are in their 30s and 20s, and they don't learn the way I used to learn. They are curious in a way that means if they want to find out something, they'll find it out right now. They won't wait for the class that's scheduled in 2 weeks. So I think that the informal nature of learning is naturally happening to where Today, at the conference today, I met so many people who I'm sure will be linking into me now and then tapping into my layers of networks and tunnelling down into the areas of their interest. So I think we have an enormous opportunity through the energy of our youth in particular, but the platforms that we now have at our disposal, that means informal learning is now actually the major method of learning, I believe.
Let's talk about some HR transformations. How does it give the due benefit through HR transformations for a country, for a developing country? Definitely you have been pursuing many ways and strategies for developing human resources in your country, and that's why you are at the top tier of development. So what are the lessons or teachings for the countries like Bangladesh?
Okay, I think it does come back to leveraging your talent. I'll go back to Ram Charan's philosophy that organisations don't create value, people do. And you have an enormous talent.
Yeah.
You have an enormous number of people. And I think what you have...
But education matters here.
Absolutely. And I think your statistics show that you have a more highly educated youth than ever before. And you have women re-entering into the workforce and beginning careers in a way never before. So you've got some really good emergent signs that suggest that you have an energised country and a hungry country for development and success. And I think they lie at the core. If we go back to that theory of owning our own sort of talent equation, the idea, if that energy comes from within your people, then that will emanate out across your country and across the organisation's success.
So apart from the organisations, do you think the right kind of policies are needed to have
Yes.
strong and working human resources for a country?
Absolutely, absolutely. If we can go back to, if we can put industrial relations aside, but if we are able to create safe and equitable workplaces, then that's at the crux, I think, of successful organisations, that if people feel they can come to work, bring their whole self to work and be safe at work, then of course they will give the most of themselves. So certainly the government has a major role to play, and consulting with business and with HR practitioners as to what are the right construct of legislative environments, because we know legislation can also crush creativity and innovation at the same time. So it is that fine balance in getting that right.
Women workforce are not given right share of opportunity, which they deserve actually in some countries. Like definitely there's so many disparity related to women, I mean for male and women, so female. So how developing nations can integrate their women workforce into the mainstream and develop their skill and seize or exploit the benefits out of it?
Definitely. I think one of the first things is to acknowledge our biases, and whether they be conscious biases, and we spoke about this earlier, or unconscious biases. And I think once we can identify why is it this statistic is and it's not just here in Bangladesh, it's in fact in Australia, we have a disproportionate number of women in senior roles, particularly in the private sector. I think the reality is that women's work careers are often interrupted, often for child rearing and the like. So one of the key drivers in the Australian economy is flexibility of work practices. Again, changing our mindset and the construct of the way we think about work, that work is not a place you go, work is something you do. And again, technology has a major role to play here, that again, work can be done anywhere, anytime, and particularly when we look at the global sort of framework. So being able to think about work in a way that means it is more able, or women are more able to exit the workforce and then re-enter the workforce, but continue their contribution and careers rather than having to go back to the ground zero. So that's been a major driver in Australia, and it's a challenge for employers because flexible work means people doing part-time roles, people not having line of sight to people, maybe working off-site. So you've got to change not only the construct of work, but you've got to change the construct of how you manage your workforce, because you're not only dealing with your workers, you're dealing now with your managers and the fact that they need to change the way they value productivity and contribution.
Lynn, you also speak to the people to develop their skills and their standard of, the excellence.
Yes.
So what is your personal way to deal with matters? I'm curious about.
Okay. I have a philosophy that that drives I would like to say all of my decisions in relation to a work environment, and that is there are three elements that we consider when we're making decisions in a business context in relation to people, and that's the organisation, the team and the individual employee. If we drive our decisions from the premise of what is right for the organisation, then that will ultimately be what is right for the team and therefore what is ultimately right for the individual. But sometimes we tend to turn that upside down and we tend to drive our decisions as to what is right for you, and then we try and make it fit into the team and then try and make it work for the organisation. But if it's not right for the organisation and it's not right for the team, then it won't be right for the individual. So it will, over time...
So you have to tailor according to the needs and aspirations.
That's right. But you must start with what's right for the organisation. At the end of the day, that is the basis or the premise upon which we should make workforce decisions, not around individuals. And I think that doesn't mean we don't want to lose talent, but if it's right for the organisation to have that unique piece of talent, guess what? We will reconstruct the work and we'll create an environment that means we can attract that work, but not driving it from the position of just the individual, which sounds harsh. But if you do it that way, inevitably it doesn't work out for the individual, so it dismantles. So we must always think from the needs of the organisation and then work from that platform.
We talked and we got so many positive vibe and positive thing about the development of human resources
today,
for any country around the world. But is there anything worst or bad side of HR?
I think the fact that, as I said, right now, anyone can do HR, and there's a bit of a perception that just because you like people, you can do HR, when in fact HR is an incredibly challenging and difficult application in any sort of career environment. I think probably the other challenge for the profession is that the success of HR is not necessarily about what they do, it's about how they partner with others. So often HR might be wanting to own the problems, or people want to give HR the problems to manage, but in fact HR's greatest contribution is the way in which it partners, from the CEO to line managers to individual employees, to have them own their careers and their futures, and again manage their contribution, their competence and their commitment.
How productive your visit in Bangladesh? How productive your visit in Bangladesh?
It's been wonderful, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn Goodyear, for joining me on my show, Frankly Speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. Dear viewers, that's all my conversation with Lynn Goodyear, Chief Executive Officer and Fellow of Australian Human Resource Institute. And we thank you indeed for watching this show. We invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, to take care and goodbye.